G'day and welcome to episode 30 of The Other Side Australia. We're 30. This is your weekly summary of the best news and views from a classical liberal perspective. I'm Damian Coory, the cranky man who thinks the country's being led into self-destruction by its elites. This week we have Marxism in the workplace, how to push back and why you must. To vaccinate or not to vaccinate? Don't ask me, but we'll have some of the most cutting-edge parts of the debate covered in summary for you in this episode. And don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger. We want you to make up your own mind. And I'll be showing you how incredibly biased that former bastion of global cable news TV, CNN, has truly become, with a very amusing little analysis. If you're new to the show, just a full proud disclosure again, we're biased towards institutional, traditional Western cultural values, classical liberalism, small business, and free market economics. Free markets, free people, individual rights, and liberty. We're anti-left and anti-woke on this show, just so you know where we stand, and we don't pretend to be neutral. And we don't cost you a cent. You only have to stay and watch if you choose to, and it's free, so let's go. Last week I started the show by talking about the bureaucrats in government who really control, or at least try to control, what we can think, say, and do. Not the pollies, but the senior and mid-level bureaucrats who inject woke ideas and identity politics and equity into everything they touch and collectively shape our national psyche. But it doesn't stop at government. There's enormous bureaucracy inside big corporations trying to drive the same agenda nowadays. Massive corporations tend to run like government departments. So is it any wonder that when the leaders of the biggest ones gather every year in Davos in Switzerland for their annual powwow with government bureaucrats, they come up with stuff as diabolically left-wing and liberty-destroying as the Great Reset? People in the corporate world these days are getting very political. Take a look at LinkedIn and you'll find heaps of posts about diversity and inclusion, about racism and sexism. LinkedIn is turning into Twitter for work these days. But it mostly seems to be coming from an identity politics leftist perspective, where the solution is almost always more rules and regulations, more Big Brother, and less individual freedom. Maybe this is because leftist identity politics is big business now, particularly for diversity and inclusion HR consultants and trainers and PR firms that want to help you with your internal communications efforts. I'd personally prefer LinkedIn remained a place for business, not politics. But I guess that's naive. There's just a few points I think we should all strive to remember when engaging with people on the left when they start to use racism and sexism to call for more rules and regulations on how we can behave or speak or think. Number one, a few data points, just a few high-profile incidents or even a spike in incidents, doesn't necessarily make the case that there's a systemic social or political problem that needs to be fixed underneath. Number two, government intervention may not be the best solution. More regulation and more government often does more unintended harm than good, and that goes for corporate rules too. Number three, identity politics comes from somewhere. It's not an organic outgrowth of kindness. It's a particular political perspective that comes from a left-wing philosophy which seeks greater control and centralized government and rule sets. And number four, there are other social political perspectives apart from neo-Marxist critical theory and identity politics. As business people and employers, we ought to ensure we're not falling into an echo chamber in our views or our policies. Another way with dealing with racism and sexism in society may lie in the ideology of personal responsibility, or the ideology of conservatism or classical liberalism. Best if we do not assume larger government, centralized power, and more authoritarian rules are the only possible solution. Better still, that we don't assume in corporations that our employees and our customers think wokeism is the only way to look at the world either. Hey, Gillette. In short, it'd be better if corporations and workplaces put more focus on diversity of thought and worldviews than diversity of skin colour, age, gender and sexuality. Or at least realise that that way of viewing the world is a Marxist one that many of us do not share. Later in this episode, we'll tell you about how in the UK now there's a citizens hotline you can call to get advice about how to deal with excessive woke culture being spewed at you by your HR department at work. That's coming up. But first, to vax or not to vax? That is the question. Geert Vandenbosch is an expert in vaccines. He first trained to be a doctor of veterinary science, but later gained a PhD in virology and spent a significant part of his career working in pharma companies in vaccines. And he's been global director of a number of vaccine programs around the world. Geert has become a bit of a celebrity in the movement against mass vaccination. In short, he believes most of the measures that we're taking now to prevent the spread of COVID may be making the virus adapt to stronger, more contagious and lethal forms. Immunology is a complex science, that's for sure. In a recent interview with this channel, Geert pulled no punches in telling Matt Wong that if you put a virus under life-threatening pressure, if you cannot kill them all and some can still replicate, they will start to evolve mutations that are a lot more powerful. This is called immune evasion or immune escape. It's a well-known phenomenon in immunology. So people who've been living in a bubble protected from exposure to the first COVID virus might be the most susceptible to future, more deadly strains. Like if you happen to live in one of the few island nations on Earth who managed to pretty much keep COVID out, and so very few people in the community carried the antibodies, and then a new really strong COVID came in, you'd be stuffed. Can't think of any country like that though, can you?
I'm telling you that we are at the eve of a huge disaster. Because the pressure that we are now exerting on the virus with those vaccines is just tremendous. Remember, we are not doing this like progressively. We are talking about mass vaccination, vaccinating millions and millions of people in an as short time period as possible. Can you imagine? And we think we can outsmart this virus. Come on. And we think we can make new vaccines against the variant strains. The virus is not going to wait till we have those vaccines ready. And so it's very, very clear. I know my message, people will maybe think I'm crazy, etc. But I think there is such compelling scientific evidence, right? To really conclude, and I invite, because I have been asking scientists, health authorities, to please start a debate on immune escape, but nobody is reacting. There is silence all over the place.
Let's pray to God he is wrong. Someone who thinks he might be wrong is Stanford-trained physician Dr. Zubin Damania, a popular video blogging doctor who goes by the online name of ZdogMD.
So in the old days of science, people would debate in conferences, and there would always be that one guy who's a little bit off his rocker, who has an idea that isn't entirely baseless, that has some credibility, but is probably wrong, and you should hear him out, and he may trigger you to think differently about what you're doing. That's important. In the days of the internet, that person on the fringe now is given an equivalent voice to hundreds of thousands of other scientists who may disagree based on the same data. And what that tells you is it's a kind of a false equivalence. This vaccine expert, he's one fringe voice. Doesn't mean you don't listen and kind of go, oh, that's interesting. But you don't give him equal platform to the others. Now, why does that matter? Because if what he's saying is wrong, which I most certainly think it is, hundreds of thousands or millions of lives are lost if we listen to him. If 100 people listen to him and decide not to get vaccinated and one of them dies, he's cost a life through this false equivalence, right? So that's why this matters.
It looks like we're all going to have to educate ourselves how to think better and analyze information better and challenge what we're seeing on the media better. But it's hard. I'm just a dumb former journalist with a podcast. Matt's just a really smart lawyer with a podcast. We have to trust the experts and the scientific consensus. We should always challenge the scientific consensus, though. We should listen to guys like Geert, Vandenbosch, but we need to put things back into a wider perspective too. It is hard. It takes time. The media hates doing it because time and staff cost money. And worst of all, it doesn't rate or sell papers. Audiences hate it. We all like to have our existing views confirmed when we watch TV. Confirmation bias, not challenged. Now, I know we have viewers who have very strong views on both sides of this debate, so I imagine this story is probably pleasing no one right now, and that's why the mainstream media feed you just one side of every story. Everyone likes being right. But that's not what this show is about, so please stay with us even when you disagree. Our goal is to give you as much of everything as reasonably possible in summary, so you can then go and make up your own minds. So here's what mainstream science says about Dr. Vandenbosch's theory, according to Dr. Dominia.
You don't come out as a dissenter and say, prove me wrong or else halt everything you're doing. Falsify me. No, the burden is on you to prove that you're right, brother. And this is what he's saying. First of all, who is he? This is important because you can always, and it's important because the anti-vax crowd has taken this guy and elevated him, of course, because his sentiment is entirely anti-current vaccine. He makes a few claims in this that we need to talk about. Are they true? The first claim is that the vaccines do not prevent or reduce even, he's saying, asymptomatic transmission in people who are vaccinated or viral replication in people who are vaccinated. This is just wrong. So the data, and especially data out of Israel, et cetera, in real world applications show that asymptomatic transmission plummets. And of course, viral replication is going to drop in a properly vaccinated person because you're binding antibodies that you've made because you've got vaccinated to the spike protein with very high affinity, and you're preventing the virus from entering cells, and you're actually activating aspects of your immune system, which I'm going to talk about, that prevent the virus from replicating. So that premise that he's operating on, I mean, maybe it's true in animals because he is a veterinarian, right? But in humans, no. And this idea that the vaccine doesn't prevent replication is not correct. In which case, one of the fundamental pillars of what he's saying is, well, you're vaccinating people, you're preventing them from getting sick with this variant, but you're allowing it still to replicate and thereby escape the vaccine and generate new variants. That's just not true.
Dr. Dominia says that Dr. Vandenbosch is right in that if you partly vaccinate a population or partially vaccinate a person, then you will be allowing for more partial replication, which means more viral replication and variants emerging. So it actually makes the case for the need to get 90% of people vaccinated properly fast.
Note this, the variants that have emerged so far emerged in the absence of vaccine pressure. Without any vaccine pressure, those already emerged, more contagious variants. And the studies so far with the existing mRNA vaccines, for example, show that even though these vaccines bind with less affinity to the new variants, they still clinically work. They still actually prevent severe disease and hospitalization, which is what you care about. So this idea of rapid viral vaccine escape has not been shown so far. Now, could it happen? Absolutely. Does he have a point in that you want to reduce viral replication as much as possible to prevent vaccine escape? Yes. So how do you do that? Vaccinate as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, to lower the pool of circulating virus. Then when variants emerge, which eventually they will, because that's what RNA viruses do, they mutate, you can develop a booster vaccine in the next year or whatever and knock those out.
Okay, so you may recall that Dr. Vandenbosch said he didn't think we'd be able to keep up with booster vaccines for new variants. Dr. Damania says we probably can. But he goes on to point out that Dr. Vandenbosch's own theory about the body's innate immune system kicking in actually supports the idea of mass vaccination.
He's a big fan of the innate immune system, this sort of adjunct part of the immune system, T cells, natural killer cells, interferon, things like that we've talked about on this show. These vaccines, these new vaccines, actually promote T helper cell responses that actually are much broader than just the antibodies. That's why they still work, even when the antibody affinity for new mutant variants is lessened. They still have this robust T cell response. Remember in the early pandemic, we were talking about why is it that some people don't seem to get that sick from coronavirus? And the thought was, well, because they have pre-existing T cell response from prior coronavirus exposures. Even though the antigens are different, the T cell memory is still there. That's why people in, say, the slums of Mumbai weren't dying of coronavirus at the rates that people in the West were. They're exposed to these things all the time. They have this T cell memory, this innate immunity, right? Well, it turns out the vaccines provide some of that as well. Yet another reason. I mean, why do you think you get these heavy-duty fevers and muscle aches and those kind of things from the vaccine? It's all that innate immune system firing up. So the idea then that the vaccines are the wrong answer, and what he's advocating is stop it and let hundreds of thousands or millions of people die from a harmless virus because you might promote variants. Do you understand why this is insane now? It makes no sense.
Okay, so that is the Stanford-trained physician, Dr. Zubin Damania. He's a very popular video blogging doctor who goes by the name of ZdogMD, and the link to his channel and that full video are in the program notes below. Can I humbly ask that if you're an anti-vax type person or anti-mass vaccination or pro-choice or whatever, and I totally support the pro-choice crowd, by the way, but if you could please put your most critical comments on ZdogMD's channel. We would love to spark debate in our comments section, but only respectful debate on the science, please. We've tried to be fair in this piece. We've also given hours of production time to Dr. Vandenbosch on the Discernable platform more broadly. There's a whole interview with Matt on our site, so please check that out too. Just don't shoot the messenger because I'm as confused as anyone. One thing is for sure though, lockdowns do not work. They cause more problems than they solve. All they do is help disorganised, badly run governments and health departments play catch-up when they shouldn't need to anymore. They cause great distress to many people, cause business destruction, job destruction, and death. And they keep us away from our families. In Queensland, nursing homes are being unnecessarily locked down for 14 days. 14 days. It's idiotic. About a month ago, the Republican governor of the US state of Texas, Greg Abbott, lifted his state's mask mandate and its restrictions for businesses. Democrats slammed the act of treating people like adults and giving them back their liberty, saying he was signing a death warrant for Texans. And President Joe Biden said it was Neanderthal thinking. He'd know. But in the months since the changes started, the number of coronavirus cases and hospitalizations have continued trending downward. The Texan newspaper reports that at its peak in January, the weekly average of new daily cases in Texas exceeded 19,000. That fell to 4,600 by the time the governor announced he was lifting the mandate, and then further to 2,400 by the end of March. The state's got about 4 million completely vaccinated and 3 million with one dose out of its population of 30 million. So it can't be the vaccination alone that's causing the drop in cases.
Have you noticed, Matt Wong, that when you watch the news, nobody smiles anymore?
First of all, you use my last name and have outed me, but second of all, you're supposed to be serious. It's news.
Is it news? Is it news?
Watch the People's Project 7:30 p.m. Fridays on Discernible, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
Well, in the UK now, there is a citizens hotline you can call to get advice about how to deal with excessive woke culture being spewed at you by your HR department at work. Its founder, Helen Pluckrose, launched the service last month, and she's told the Australian Financial Review that the question she most hears is, am I going mad? She says she set up the service called Counterweight to let employees know that they're not going mad. Their perceptions are correct, and she wants to help them have the understanding and language to counter what they're being asked to do, think, or say by the woke forces at work. Pluckrose co-authored a book called Cynical Theories: how universities made everything about race, gender, and identity, and why this harms everybody. The book was a bestseller last year. She's told the AFR that Counterweight gets clients from every religion, ethnicity, and political belief flooding their site. As an example, she says they currently have a black engineer who's being disciplined for refusing to take his diversity and inclusion training. And get this, she told the newspaper that there's a real growing concern among aid organisations and charities about funds being diverted away from essential care like food and clean water to be ploughed into the diversity training of staff. Former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson has a podcast on which he interviewed Helen Pluckrose and her co-author Dr. James Lindsay at length. The link's in our program notes as usual, but for our liberalism segment today, here's a short clip where John makes the point that most of us don't know where all this crazy woke stuff is coming from, or even realise that it has a very big movement of academics behind it who now wield significant power in our governments and in our corporations.
The public, decent average citizens in our streets, right across the West in particular, are staggered by what's happening. They're overlooking or perhaps not fully understanding that this is, if you like, the front of very powerful ideas that are fomenting away in the background. And your book does bring to life just how powerful it is and how much it's fomenting and how extensive it is. It's also, I would call it, I think, a sort of deep lament for the decline of what you would call true liberalism. Now, each of us might, in political and belief terms and so forth, come from somewhat different places, but under liberalism, we would say we're able to communicate. We have enough in common, enough respect for one another and for each other's dignity and our perspectives on life to be able to deal with one another and communicate with one another effectively. And that lets us hammer out our ideas and find sensible consensus. So I have to say to you, I share your very deep concern about the breakdown of liberalism. But can I have it in your words? What to you is liberalism, and why is it so important to fight to try to re-establish it?
Okay, so when we're looking at liberalism in that broad sort of philosophical sense, so we're now speaking from three different continents, each of which actually use liberal in slightly different political sense, but quite radically different political sense. So yeah, it's important to clarify first of all what we mean by liberal. We're talking about an ethos of freedom, freedom of belief, freedom of speech, of plurality. So people can have different ideas and they can coexist alongside each other without anybody having to dominate over anybody else. It's got at its center, there's the individual. We want everybody to have access to everything, regardless of what their identity is. And there's the universalism, in which we believe that we are all members of the human race, that everybody again should have the same access to everything, and we can empathize across any kind of divides that exist. And within that, there's also in liberalism, there's the whole sort of idea of colorblindness, in which we're not judging people by the color of their skin. There's meritocracy, where we want people to be able to achieve on their own merits, which doesn't mean assuming that everybody can already do that and there aren't any barriers in place. It's about creating a society where they can. So this is the very sort of broad idea of liberalism, of freedom and equal opportunity.
If liberalism is such, and I think we're all saying it, such a superior social philosophy, why is it in decline? Why is it under threat and being weakened? Has it not defended itself well enough? Haven't we taught it well enough in our schools?
I think because we've had liberal societies for quite a long time, this is it's been a good sort of 50 years at least since we have been understanding liberalism as a norm. We haven't had to defend it against anything. Particularly, we haven't had to defend it against claims of social justice. Using liberal principles has always been the way to achieve social justice. That was how the civil rights movement worked. It was how liberal feminism worked, how the early gay pride worked. So this has been a norm for quite a while. We haven't had to defend it, but I think liberalism isn't really a very intuitive system for humans. I think if we look at history and we look at most of the world, it looks like humans trying to dominate each other, trying to set up one school of thought and then make everybody else adhere to it. So this whole sort of liberal development is really very new. It's a product of modernity, and it needs to be consistently maintained and upheld and reinforced, and we haven't been doing that. Now there's a tendency to think of it as hopelessly naive, and within the sort of critical theories that we're looking at, there's this idea that it is actually white, male and Western, rather than something that belongs to all humans, that there are liberals everywhere.
And that's former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson, hopefully soon to be Senator Anderson, interviewing author and founder of the anti-woke hotline in the UK, Helen Pluckrose. Last week I expressed perhaps a sinful amount of joy at the demise of the ABC show Q&A, whose ratings have plummeted by more than 2/3 to a tragic 200,000 people a week. The geniuses behind the show say they don't care about the ratings because they really like the way the show is looking this year. Right. Well, that's nice. But you're using our tax dollars to produce a show that suits your own very narrow tastes and ideology, and that only 1 in 125 Aussies can be bothered watching even a little bit of. That's not ethical. Sorry. You need to think deeper and change your ways, or resign and pay for your own podcast to sprout your own views like we do. But when it comes to media double standards and hypocrisy, I've never seen anything quite like this. Brian Stelter is a prominent news presenter and anchorman on the American cable news network CNN. Stelter is widely known to be very biased to the left and one of the network's worst offenders, and that's really saying something. CNN took a hard turn left in the Trump era when it realised it always seemed to be running third in the three-horse cable TV news race, regularly getting smashed in the ratings by the other two American big 24-hour news cable channels, the right-wing Fox News and the woker-than-woke left-wing MSNBC. In February, the man behind Fox News Now, Lachlan Murdoch, opened up on what is perfectly clear to anyone. Fox News is a right-wing leaning network. Shock! CNN, and particularly Brian Stelter, couldn't restrain themselves.
So this should come as no surprise. Fox CEO Lachlan Murdoch, son of Fox founder Rupert Murdoch, telling an investment group the network is now the loyal opposition to the Biden administration. And quoting Murdoch here, the main beneficiary of the Trump administration from a ratings point of view is MSNBC. That's because they were the loyal opposition. That's what our job is now with the Biden administration. You'll see our ratings really improve, he said. CNN chief media correspondent Brian Stelter is here with me now. Well, I mean, transparency at least, Brian.
I guess so. After 10, 15 years of this network claiming it's just fair and balanced every time it's turned further to the right, now the younger Murdoch is admitting what the network is all about. It is an anti-Democrat network. That's the agenda. You know, the spin today, Brianna, is he was talking about the opinion shows. But the opinion shows are what define Fox News. All of the newscasts have been shrinking, and the audience for those news programs has been shrinking as well. Fox viewers want the red meat provided by Tucker Carlson. And by the way, who is Lachlan Murdoch's closest friend or associate at Fox? It's Tucker Carlson. The channel is increasingly the Tucker Carlson channel. And that tells you everything you need to know about the Fox News playbook right now.
So let me just get this straight. A right-wing opinion news network that says it's right-wing is a bad thing, but a left-wing opinion news network that consistently pretends to be a neutral source of news while dripping in opinion commentary against the right is just fine. This takes lack of self-awareness to a new level. But it didn't stop there.
It is notable that Lachlan was speaking to investors saying, hey, the ratings are going to come back. The viewers are going to come home. And to some extent, that is starting to become true. But this is all about business. It's all about profit. I think when people want to understand how this propaganda machine works and when it doesn't work, ultimately it is about Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch and how much money they can make from all of this.
Pot? Kettle? Black? Can someone give Brian a mirror? I mean, really. It's okay to make money out of a media organisation. It's okay to have a slant to your opinion coverage, so long as you're not hiding it from anyone, so long as you're not lying to the world about the fact that you have a massive political bias by presenting as a balanced news outfit, like Australia's ABC, and so long as you're not funded with money taken from all taxpayers, like Australia's ABC. But I digress, forgive me. Back to CNN.
You know, Brianna, there is another Murdoch son, James Murdoch. He's on the outside. He's much more liberal. He is disgusted by the Tucker Carlsons of the world. But right now, he's not involved. He's biding his time, wondering if someday he might be able to come in, try to take over. That would be a kind of HBO drama-worthy moment. But so far, there's no sign of that.
Because right is bad and left is good. And Tucker Carlson is bad. But this is fine. The Truth in Media organization, Project Veritas, recorded 3 CNN staffers undercover in 2017, unveiling significant anti-Trump bias in the network's culture. The Hollywood Reporter news site explains.
On Friday, the group released its 3rd video this week, which includes an interview with a young CNN associate producer, Jimmy Carr, who was not aware he was being recorded. The CNN morning news show New Day producer is shown maligning Trump, Trump voters, and White House counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. In the footage, Carr is seen saying of Trump, "We all recognize he is a clown, that he is hilariously unqualified for this. He's really bad at this, and that he does not have America's best interests. We recognize he's just effing crazy." In the video, Carr says that about 90% of CNN employees share his contention that Trump is crazy. This video, like 2 others published this week, one a recorded conversation with CNN health producer John Bonifield and one with commentator Van Jones, is devoid of context about how the interview came to be. In the second video, a Project Veritas associate recorded Jones saying that, quote, "The whole Russia thing is just a big nothing burger," seemingly casting doubt on the network's coverage of potential ties between the Trump campaign and administration and Russia.
Russia this, Russia that.
Because it's ratings.
Because it's ratings?
Our ratings are incredible right now.
It now seems pretty clear that CNN's bias and dishonesty is a plague in the once respected news organization, O'Keefe says in the 3rd video.
But with a blind spot to self-awareness the size of Mount Everest, we can understand why CNN's Brian Stelter just doesn't get it. He did this interview in 2018 with the conservative Daily Wire channel's Ben Shapiro.
Listen, I don't want CNN to disappear. I don't want the New York Times to disappear. I don't want the Washington Post to disappear. I want them to do what they say they are supposed to be doing. I want them to perform objective journalism if that's what they say they're going to do, and opinion journalism if they want to say that they're opinion journalists. That's fine. My problem is when this is why my critique of, for example, the New York Times op-ed page is far less than my critique of the New York Times objective journalism. There's a difference between op-ed and journalism. It's why my critique of MSNBC sometimes is a lot less strident, I think, than my critique of CNN, because CNN purports to be objective. MSNBC really does not purport to be objective in the same way.
Part of me thinks that you and your colleagues at the Daily Wire should try to get jobs then at the New York Times. If you don't like the coverage, try to be a part of the solution as opposed to complaining about it.
I mean, I don't know. Would you hire me? I really doubt that. And not only that,
I wanted you as a guest for many months.
I'll be frank with you. I mean, I make a lot of money.
I wanted you as a guest for many months. Isn't that partly because there's been a decade-long movement on the right to discredit the media well before President Trump came along?
Yeah, I would be surprised if it's just a decade. I mean, I think that on the
decades long.
You know, on the right for as long as I've been alive, there's been a lot of questions about media objectivity, and I don't think that those questions are ill-founded. I think this is why, as I've been saying, it's really incumbent on the media to do as much reporting of the facts as possible and leave a lot of the hyperbole out of it. I know that's really difficult in a time when, you know, the hyperbole seems to not only get ratings but also to jog people's kind of amygdalas. But the fact is that the more the media underplays, I think the better they will do in terms of people trusting them, because at this time, what's happening right now is everything's breaking down into tribal affinity. President Trump says fake news. A lot of his people say, okay, well, if the president says it, the media are fake on a lot of topics, or at least they are biased on a lot of topics, so why wouldn't they be biased here as well? The media sort of need to bend over backwards to prove that they aren't biased, especially in cases like the Russia investigation, especially if that bias all runs in one direction. It's not like some of the members of CNN are pushing a particular agenda and some are pushing another agenda. There's always, if there is a bias, it is universally to one side, and that's what people on the right are seeing.
Can't imagine why. CNN's primetime star, Chris Cuomo, is the brother of Democrat New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, now under investigation for his mishandling of COVID and for 8 complaints of alleged sexual harassment in the workplace. Watch what happens when Cuomo interviews a prominent Republican senator like Ted Cruz, as he did the day after the second presidential campaign debate on October 4.
Will you be that voice? Will you say playing nice with the Proud Boys is wrong?
Well, listen, I've condemned the Proud Boys long ago. I think white supremacists, Klansmen, Nazis are ignorant, bigoted morons. I also think that the American people care about the Constitution and Bill of Rights. They care about the Supreme Court. It was a big reason the president was elected. It was a big reason we have a Republican majority. And I think this vacancy on the court, it's the reason I wrote this book that was released just this week, because it focuses on the rights that are precious to so many of us: free speech, religious liberty, the Second Amendment, and how all of them really hang in the balance at the court. And I think that issue matters enormously, and for me, it's the most compelling issue.
Absolutely. Now, I will exercise my right and say, was the president wrong to go soft on the Proud Boys in the debate last night?
Oh, look, I wish he had been much clearer in his denunciation. I was glad today that he walked that back.
No, he didn't.
And look, I'm glad that he sought to walk it back. I'm glad his campaign sought to walk it back. But let me be clear also. The press is completely hypocritical on this issue.
Really?
The press is partisan in this regard. So 10 years ago, 2010, Joe Biden gave a eulogy for Robert Byrd, who was a grand cyclops of the KKK. Yeah. That's 10 years ago.
You're really going to go with that?
Oh, yeah.
I know you're a master debater, and Professor Dershowitz tells me you were the smartest student he ever had at Harvard Law. You're going to go with that weak-ass argument here? Byrd, who had a complete enlightenment about how hate was wrong, who changed his life, who spoke about it, who changed his ways.
Chris, have you ever eulogized a Klansman? I haven't.
Really?
Look,
am I insulting you, sir?
Oh, yeah.
How so?
Oh, yeah, you are. And you're enjoying it. That's
I am
fine.
not enjoying it at all.
Chris,
I'm not enjoying anything about this except having an opportunity for you to say the right thing at the right time.
Chris, there was a time when CNN actually cared about being journalistic and talking about facts. Donald Trump broke you guys. I mean, you're just, your entire show, your entire network now is just how much you hate Trump. And you know what? I think a lot of people, are interested in, you said in your opening, it was very interesting, you said the president didn't say anything positive about the country. Well, I thought the most important moment in the debate last night was when the president made very clear that Joe Biden's policy agenda is shutting down the country, shutting down small businesses, and shutting down schools. And our priority needs to be opening up the economy, bringing jobs back, getting kids back in school. And that's a very different policy agenda. We have had an enormous economic impact from this pandemic. We need to restart the economy, and I think the president and Joe Biden have very different visions. Joe Biden's policies, I think, don't work and hurt a whole lot of people. And when I'm back in Texas, people in Texas don't understand why the press is just like the only thing you talk about is how much you hate the president.
But I have to tell you, to cheapen it by saying, I want to take political shots about COVID. You know I had it. You know my wife had it. You know my kid had it. You know, I network with people all over this country who are still suffering with it. You know, I hate that kids aren't in school, or your staff should have told you. I talk about it every night. It couldn't be less political for me. I don't want people to get sick.
Chris,
and if they tested more, Ted, they'd be better.
Governors. And let me say something. There is something disgusting that Democrats are doing, that Joe Biden does, and that you do, which is you try to blame the people who've lost their lives on your political enemies. And that's just not right. It's not right
I'm
at all.
saying that when you hear
particularly not
200,000 people die, you don't say it is what it is. I'm saying that
but you know
when
what?
You could have slowed it down and you
right,
didn't,
Chris,
you
when
own
your
it.
brother has presided over the state with the highest death rate in the country.
And New York's record will stand for itself.
I know your brother didn't want those people to lose their lives, but you shouldn't play politics with
So you don't
attack.
think he intentionally killed them? That's good. That's very charitable of you, Ted.
Of course not. But I do think we can have a very reasonable policy discussion about the policy mistakes in New York and New Jersey of sending COVID-positive patients into nursing homes. I think that was a very serious policy mistake.
Right? That wasn't the most vulnerable
population. It's one of the reasons why the death rate in New York is 4 times the death rate in
Texas. The place where the governor said that you didn't need to test and you didn't need masks, right?
Okay,
and the president gave him a pat on the head?
That's just a complete fabrication, and we test a lot. I've been tested
The same governor who said we didn't need to shut down, go out, and then he had to turn around and do it differently because cases popped all over the place? That guy? Is that what
Chris,
you're talking about?
Was it a
Or is that too
mistake?
political?
Was it a mistake when your brother implemented a policy that nursing homes had to accept COVID-positive patients and endangered the lives of
My
tens
brother
of
was the
thousands
first
of
one
seniors
to
in New York
say
State?
that
Was it
there was a
mistake?
learning curve and that mistakes were made and they changed things as soon as they could.
That's CNN pretending to be news.
I was told that this is the Atlas Shrugged of our day, the Mandibles. Yeah, but it's a giant book with tiny words to get through. Except, did you know I've been teaching speed reading course for 6 years?
Really?
You'd think I'd apply those same principles, but one of the things we use in the course is to use an app, which you can't use on a book.
No.
Yeah, there's these apps called RSVP, Rapid Serial Visual Presentation, where they flash words at you. Anyway, these are the kinds of secrets I teach in my speed reading course. There's a link in the description below. It's always under $25 on sale for you guys. Have a look at that course. Improve your reading speed exponentially really fast. You should do it too.
I will.
And if that wasn't comedy enough for you, it's time for our comedy segment this week. Here's a little clip on YouTube from Ricky Gervais' Netflix special, Humanity, which I think rather fits the mood. I reckon you'd still get Brexit, but with an even bigger majority, actually. You know, post-EU Britain has 50% vaccination levels already, while France, Germany, Spain and Italy are all hovering at around only 12%. Better off out of the EU, maybe? More efficient as an independent nation, are we? And that's it for another week of The Other Side Australia. Don't forget to subscribe everywhere, and if you want to support us, tell your friends. If you'd like to sponsor the show or any of the Discernible shows, do get in touch with us. We are taking sponsorships in the coming months. We'll see you next week on the Discernible platform at discernible.io. Sign up to the Crew for early info and premium content, or check us out at Discernible on YouTube and Facebook, The Other Side Australia on Apple and Spotify podcast platforms for audio only, and on the Good Source platform. We'll catch you next week. And in the meantime, don't let the woke kids get you down.